In addition to our crews in the field, we have a panel of political analysts with us throughout the night. With their expertise, we'll help you make sense of the numbers and give some context as to how the results might affect you.
Yeah, and also how that could affect the state as a whole. Joining us tonight is Aaron Call, Director of Debate for the University of Michigan. He's written several books analyzing presidential speeches and debate strategies. We also have University of Michigan Dearborn professor Tim Kiska, who's been with us throughout the night watching those numbers and breaking that down as those numbers continue to change as we get later into the night.
And we're also joined by our own Carol Kane, host of Michigan Matters, which airs weekly on CBS News Detroit. Carol, let's start by talking Macomb County, one of those counties that could tip the scales in this election.
This has been a huge county for this race. I'm talking right now, I've got Mark Hackle, Macomb County Executive, and former Michigan GOP Chair Susie Avery, who also was involved with MSU's MPLP program, which has trained thousands of young people for careers in politics. Macomb County, both candidates, both Kamala Harris and also Donald Trump, spent a lot of time there. When will we know how Macomb County is voting tonight, Mark?
Yeah, great question. Again, we have a bit of a challenge when it comes to reporting our numbers. And it's unfortunate whether it's issues with a clerk's office or not. It's still a responsibility of the clerk's office of the county to try to figure out how to compile it, get the data out there, and it's just not there yet. So again, this may be one of those late into the nights before we actually hear what those numbers are coming out of Macomb County.
And we saw both candidates coming into Macomb on a regular basis here. You've spent obviously your whole life in Macomb. Have you seen the candidates spending this much time in Macomb or Michigan for that matter?
Well, Trump always has. Whether it's 2016, 2020, he's always been in Macomb, and he realized that was an area that he needed to work, and he worked it hard. When Hillary came around, her election, she was nowhere to be seen. Biden, he came around not just election time, but even before that. So we're not seeing. Again, we're seeing more of that coming even from the Democratic Party.
And Susie, your dad's former mayor of Mount Clemens. You have a lot of experience in Macomb County as well. Your thoughts about Macomb County in terms of could this be the last county to hold out and bring the conclusion to this historic election with its numbers?
Oh, I think there'll be other counties that also will have the same problem in terms of delivery. And to be honest, most clerks just want to make sure it's honest and the numbers are correct, et cetera. And of course, it makes people like Mark and me and you, very anxious because we would like to know the answer. But we really can't until the votes are in from all the counties in Michigan. It probably won't be until late tonight or tomorrow morning.
Mm-hmm. We've heard too all the way through here, and particularly a lot today about the female vote, women's vote in this. We talked about the gender gap between the two candidates in terms of who was supporting them. Susie, real quickly, how do you think the women's vote, when it's all said and done, will be in a voice in determining the outcome?
Well, I think the women's vote has always been a big voice in elected politics. If you look back and see who's voted in elections before, usually it's 55% women, 45% men.
Mm-hmm. Mark, how did you see it?
Yeah, I see this. It's going to have a huge impact on this election, the women's voice, but also I think the younger voters that I've been hearing from. And I got two young boys that live in my house right now. That's their first election, and they got out and they voted. So, and I'm talking to them, and they talk about their friends that are very much engaged in this election. So I think that's going to have an impact, younger voters as well as obviously females.
We know that in the 2022 midterms, it was young people turning out to vote. That changed and made the blue wall with Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. The big challenge and the question tonight is, did the young people show up in East Lansing and in Detroit, down at Wayne State and in Ann Arbor? And Susie, I know you have talked about get out the vote as the biggest issue in this whole campaign here and getting folks here. How do you think it went this time?
Well, I think we're going to know better in the next couple of days how it went. I mean, when I personally went and saw what was happening at MSU, I didn't think that they had nearly the lines that they had before. Now, a lot of people are saying it's because of the early voting.
Yeah.
But I think we shall wait and see, to be quite honest.
Yeah. How do you see, too, when it comes to young people and inspiring them to go into politics with everything they watched and the bombastic nature of what took place here in the last 6 months, year in this whole contest? Do you think that will inspire more people or turn them off to potentially looking at careers?
Oh, I don't know. I think young people will always be interested. Look at Mark and me, how long we've stuck with it. All of our life. I mean, Mark was in law enforcement for many years, but it's a great time to be in politics. It really is a great time to be in politics. A lot of excitement and a lot of good stuff.
And we're going to talk just real quickly, just quick yay, nay on Mike Rogers, Alyssa Slotkin. We won't know the results too, but based on what we're seeing already, minus Macomb?
Yeah, I think Slotkin's going to win that one.
I think Rogers is going to win.
Oh, well, of course, of course. And John James, Caramalinga?
That's a toss-up. That's, again, two good candidates, each party. So that's the one that's going to be told when Macomb's votes come in.
John James,
Because?
because he's the better candidate. And
Well-
he's the best person. He's got a record of what he's done, and he's a good guy.
And Caramalinga, it was so close last time. You're
It
sure
was.
of this?
He was.
Yeah, the Democrats did not fund his campaign the way they should. They did this time. So, if I guess I had to take, a position on that as to who might have the edge, Carl probably will. But the reality is, John's an incumbent in that position right now. So, again, that's why I say it's up for grabs.
And difference maker this time, as we had more people voting in advance, mail-in, being able to go in person earlier, is that going to change politics and how we do things going forward, do you think?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that's not going to change. I think you're going to continue to see that. The clerks have got a lot of work, to do as a result of this. But for the most part, they continue to do the good work to try to make sure the elections are fair and making sure that every vote is counted. So they're doing a great job.
I hate to say this to your audience, but it just means that we're all going to start electioneering a lot earlier than we used to because of the early vote.
On the other hand, Kamala Harris has been at it for, 107 days. That's not a bad thing. Get campaign over with. It's like how they do it in Canada, right, when they get the prime minister.
I think we're all glad we're getting this over with.
Speed it
Get
up.
my
speed
TV
it up.
back.
Thank you guys so much for
bet.
being here. Really appreciate it. And
Thanks,
we're going to
Carol.
send it back to you guys there in the desk.
All right, thank you, Carol. We do want to focus more on Macomb County, but before we do, we have a race alert. CBS News is now projecting that Haley Stevens has won re-election for the third time in District 11, much of Oakland County.
That's right. She is beating out Republican challenger Nick Somberg. We'll have more on that in just a moment. But right now, we want to focus on Macomb County. Let's go to Tim now. Tim, what are you seeing?
Well, not much right now out of Macomb County, which is what we've been talking about. It's just going to take a little while. Now, only 1%, so that's a heck of a lot of vote right now to go for. Now, let's take a look at Oakland, which is going to be very interesting. Once again, a lot of vote, 59% to go, but Alyssa Slotkin right now is, at this point, 55%. That is about where Joe Biden was 4 years ago. And one little factoid, Joe Biden won this state with 150,000 votes 4 years ago. He won Oakland County by 100,000 votes. So this would seem to bode well for Alyssa Slotkin if this holds up. But once again, I can't stress this enough. There's a whole lot of vote to be counted here. So that's kind of where we are there. Washtenaw County, also kind of interesting. Here's the number. 55% of the vote in. Alyssa Slotkin's hitting 64%. Now, most of the time, if you get 64%, you are popping champagne corks. This is a little it's interesting because Joe Biden did 68% 4 years ago. Now, there's a drop off here a little bit. Now, maybe it'll change with 45% in, but if she stays there, I think the war in Gaza and Lebanon may have an impact. This is where we might be seeing it, but once again, can't stress this enough, whole bunch of votes to be counted. Back to you.
Tim, thank you so much. Definitely a lot of votes to be counted. Another big group, though, that a lot of leaders have been focusing on is the Arab American vote here in Michigan, one of the largest Arab American populations in the country. Kelly Vaughn is live in Dearborn from the American Muslims and Allies Watch Party.
Kelly, Dearborn was at the center of that powerful, uncommitted movement earlier in the year against President Biden. What are you hearing from people there tonight?
That could play a role again in this election. I'm speaking with people here. It's actually a nonpartisan gathering here tonight. So people who voted for Trump, Kamala, people who abstained from voting altogether, all gathered here to support the Arab American community because they say this election is really sensitive for them. I'm actually joined by Allah. He's a first-time voter. Now, you were saying you kind of had a hard time picking a candidate?
Yeah, I did.
Why?
Because, it's my first time voting. That's number one. Number two, with everything going on in the Middle East and everything, and I'm half Lebanese and half Palestinian. So voting today made me think about what's the future for America. What's going to happen in the next 4 years? How's America going to run? How's everything going to become? And how the world in the Middle East would end, if it's going to end, if it's not. How am I supposed to support someone that is making promises but would not show the promises? So like today's vote was like a little rough.
I understand a lot of people here telling me that tonight. Thank you so much for your time. Now, this gathering was meant for the community to be able to come together no matter who they voted for, and it was hosted by the Arab American Anti-Discrimination Committee for the community here in Dearborn. Take a listen.
The goal of tonight is to bring the community together. This has been a challenging year. It's been a tough year. This is not really a celebration. It's going to be a somber moment because it does close the chapter on an administration that's allowed a genocide to continue under their watch.
Now, dozens of people have been gathering here tonight. They're watching the results roll in, and they're actually holding discussions and panels about the power of the Arab American vote. And like I said, people here, they didn't all vote the same way. Some voted for Trump, Kamala, and again, a lot of people here are telling me they actually chose to vote a third party to kind of protest their options in this election. Now, they say no matter what happens tomorrow morning, Biden is still the president, so they plan to continue to pressure his administration to end the Israel-Hamas war. Reporting live in Dearborn, Kelly Vaughn, CBS News Detroit.
All right, very important voting block there. Thank you very much, Kelly. Now again, CBS News is projecting that Democratic Congresswoman Haley Stevens has defeated her challenger, Republican Nick Somberg, in District 11. Stevens, who represents a significant portion of Oakland County, was first elected back in 2018, and this would be her fourth term. Let's bring it back to our in-house expert right now, Aaron Call. He is the director of debate at the University of Michigan. Thank you for being here.
It's great to be back.
Yeah, a lot of moving parts tonight, a lot of things changing by the minute. So far, how are you feeling?
It has some 2016 vibes. You know, it's very tight, and it seems like Trump's doing very well in the Sun Belt, but really everything's going to come down to this blue wall, states of Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and it seems very close and could be even tighter margins from either 2016 or 2020.
Yeah, as we start to get those results in, it's a little bit of a different situation than we saw a few years ago. A few years ago, some people were more likely to vote early. Others, Republicans, were more likely to vote in person on Election Day. So that election night, there was sort of the mirage where it seemed like somebody was ahead early and then it changed later. What are you expecting in the hours and days to come?
Yeah. It could be totally different this year. Previously, as you mentioned, Donald Trump said, don't trust the early vote, just do in person. He's a big proponent of paper ballots. And this time, looking at some of the early voting, it looks like Republicans did a much better job on that. We're past COVID, and so it's easier to do that. And so where before Republicans really controlled the Election Day vote, this time it may be a little more even. So some of the preconceived notions we had, what happened in previous elections, could be the opposite this time, given that we're past the pandemic and just the voting habits of the two parties.
There are a lot of different groups who could really have a significant impact on how things go, whether it be women or the Arab American vote, like we said, very important, black vote, young vote. What are you thinking in terms of how these leaders have tried to reach those groups through their campaigns?
Yeah, I mean, an election this close, turnout, enthusiasm, rallies, events, all those things are going to be really important. And if the state could be determined by just thousands, tens of thousands of votes, and so any given margin is really important. So, and it was a problem all the way back to the primary. If there's 100,000 uncommitted vote in a state only determined by such a few amount of votes, then that could be really big. There's been a big chance this time college campuses, a lot of events. We saw a little more voting there. But if you look at some of the exit polls, both locally and state and nationally, Trump seemed to have been doing pretty well with some non-traditional groups. Younger voters, Latinos, African Americans, and so he's just a really unorthodox candidate where he kind of takes parties off the table and he's appealing to some different constituencies and putting together a very unique coalition, which could be enough this time.
Is there one of those constituencies that you think will really tip the scales in Michigan specifically? Is it that uncommitted vote? Is it the Arab American vote? Is it black males? Is it suburban women or college students?
It's kind of a combination of all those, and then which will be the most important in the end. It seems like in Michigan and also nationally, Trump's doing really well with rural votes. He's doing better with African American males, better with Arab Americans than normal. But then could those be counteracted by maybe more younger voters for Harris and some more doing better in the suburbs? That's kind of some of the conventional wisdom. If that happens, then it could be really close, or it could just be a little bit Trump a little bit more because those margins and those constituencies that he's doing better in, Harris just can't counteract them just quite enough.
In terms of the presidential candidates, both sides really focused a lot on Michigan. Do you think that has been effective in any way in this outcome, all of those visits that we've seen?
Definitely. I mean, dozens and dozens of visits, and it really has been the epicenter. It may not be the quite tipping state of a state like Pennsylvania because it has a little bit more electoral votes. But yes, I mean, for Harris to win, the getting just Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin are all key. And historically, those three really vote in unison. I think you have to go back to 1988 where there's kind of been different. So, you know, spending all that time here, media market and other things, it trickles over to those other three states. And so, yes, I think that it'd be very hard to see Harris winning this without Michigan, and spending that time. Trump ending his campaign again in Grand Rapids really could pay off, especially if it's very close.
We know that Harris has done a lot better with women voters. Trump seems to be polling stronger with male voters. Any prediction as to how that gender divide is going to impact Michigan's results?
Yeah, it does seem like the gender divide has been somewhere maybe between 5 and 10% with more women voting, and that's just because of population and voting statistics. And but then I think you have to look at it a little bit specifically for men. Trump does better generally, but also in some different populations, which we've already mentioned, Latino men, African American men, and so in general, you'd think the gender divide should help Harris a little bit, but it's tough.
All right. Thank you so much, Aaron.